I welcome all to another episode of Business Battles. Last month in March, specifically I think on 12th March, I wrote an article, How in Automotive 2030, which the series I'm doing, the software defined vehicle dream is very hard hit by the hardware reality. Now you can see the hardware towards coming in. And I got some messages on LinkedIn, I got some personal messages, and also during my discussions with my colleagues also, and with the clients, and wherever I talk about the automotives, this point came in. So I thought, let me do a small video on this, and it will be easier to explain then why I think so. Now we all know that because of the software defined vehicles, our car has become an application on the wheels. And while it has become an application on wheels, but most of the OEMs, I think everyone, all of them, especially the old legacy ones, and we know very well that who are the legacy OEMs. I need not to take the names of them. They have started running into a hard ceiling. They have constraints of their hardware designs, especially those hardware designs which they have chosen maybe a few years ago, and now they are constrained. How can they change? Because they are so tightly coupled with the ECU, they are so tightly coupled with their networks, they are so tightly coupled with the customized chips, and to change them, it's not only slow process, which makes them less competitive. It is also very expensive, and nowadays you see that the margins are eroding in the manufacturing industry. The automotive companies all over the place are struggling in the price wars, margin wars, backward integration, forward integration, the impact of the new age EVs coming in, and blah blah. So a lot of that has been happening. So it is becoming very risky to add new software features in that existing constrained tied up system, and also it's very difficult to evolve that kind of ecosystem. Now if you look at you know at this point of time, particularly we are sitting in 2026, if we talk about under the hood of automotives, you see silicon chips are more than ever. And it is not going to stop, because the way the progress in the technology is happening, and the way AI compute and the integration and penetration of AI is happening in the cars, it is going to increase. So that is definitely given. Because now under the hood, you have ADAS systems, you have infotainment, you have MCUs, you have power. So all these things are scattered inside the hood or inside the whole car. And all of them, especially for the legacy OEMs and for your all historical platforms, these are all tied specifically to certain suppliers. These are all tied specifically to certain tool chains. And therefore, the supply chain is very tight, very fragile also in that way, because each supplier are part of different geographies. While a country like China has been able to make a homogeneous supply chain within their own country, so they can move very fast. But if you take examples of European OEMs or American OEMs, it is very difficult. India is a separate thing which we can discuss sometime later, because it is still not a very large market, and still while it has been completely localized, but the amount of advancement in the industry is not yet there. So we'll probably cover it in some other series. But one thing is very clear: if you want to rethink your SDV, because of this tightly coupled hardware, and hardware is constraining, and you're hitting your the ceiling, and this is a hard reality. You have to rethink SDV. You have to rethink the chips in the SDV. But when you think and you rethink the chips in the SDV, you have to rethink the architecture. And that's why a lot of OEMs have been moving for several years from standalone ECUs to zonal computers, zonal compute, and so on. So this is for definitely very advantageous for the OEMs who are able to take that call in some part of their platforms, because this allows them to use the ECUs and maybe the platforms, and very reusable platforms. So basically, they not only reuse their platforms across the architecture across the platforms, but they also get the capability to add features in a decoupled way, and especially without touching the low level hardware and their wiring and so on. So overall, the silicon strategy is very important, which needs to be embedded and integrated into the whole SDV architecture. Let me also see if I can quote some of the paragraphs of my article which I also wrote. So finally, I concluded in the article saying that SDVs live or die on data. Every data path runs in the vehicle silicon before it reaches the cloud. Now, memory, networking, and security chips must be sized and architected around future use cases, not just today's homologation needs, but even for the evolving automotive regulations. So, therefore, that demands true to chip cloud thinking, that demands deciding what's the process at the edge, that demands what's streamed and what's not streamed, that demands how it's secured and filtered along the way, so that tomorrow AI models and services are feasible on the hardware you ship today. So at this point of time, the question I'm leaving for the boards and CTOs, the key question is hardware enabling your SDV strategy or silently constraining it? The winners will be those who accept short-term complexity, rationalizing ECUs, standardizing platforms, and building deeper semiconductor partnerships. To buy long-term strategic freedom, everyone else will keep discovering that their software limits are in fact still very much hardware defined. And that's where I concluded that while they are on the way to make their vehicles apps on wheels, software defined, but all are really constrained by the hardware. When I wrote my book, which was published last year, Hardware to Code, I described that how the decoupling of hardware and the software is helping the industry to evolve much faster. But in reality, hardware still is tied very closely in a lot of legacy players, and it will be a hard reality for them to decouple it and probably to create new platforms, probably to create new architectures which can completely redefine their next fleet of vehicles. So at this point of time, while it is the barrier to enter the automotive industry is lower because of electric vehicles and the software and all the strategies. However, because to build a brand and productionizing it and keep sustaining the interest of the consumers, it's very difficult for the new players to enter and make a name for themselves. Barring few of the players which we hear, like Neo has been trying to do that in China. Rivian was trying to do it in US, and then some small startups also coming like Lucid Motors and so on. But they have not been still able to capture a volume which is worthy of them to be called as top OEMs. Of course, you might say that Tesla is an example which has evolved in the last 15 years, but that is a one-off case. So therefore, I strongly feel that the current OEMs from Japan, from US, from Europe, and in fact China also, which is now trying to globalize their products to be shipped to Europe and other markets. These legacy players have to really think and modify and rethink their SDV architecture so that the architecture is not constrained by their hardware choices, and they have to take that plunge. They have to take that plunge that okay, for next couple of years they may be operating at a margin slightly lower, but they will be able, they are deciding to completely modify or revamp their fleet of the cars. So with this, I try to close today's discussion that yes, the SDV dreams are hit hard by the hardware reality. However, it is a great opportunity for the established automotive OEMs to redefine their strategy, completely discard things which are not going to work and be efficient in future, and move completely from their old hardware tied architectures to new silicon strategy embedded in the software and also decoupled with the hardware so that they can use and reuse their platforms efficiently. So do drop your comments. What do you feel about this? What do you think? And especially if you want to know about new future OEMs, what they are doing, I can reservedly comment about them as well. So thank you so much. See you again.